The sky above Earth burned with orange fire as another defense platform exploded in orbit. Commander Daehyun stood at the observation window of the Himalayan command bunker, watching his world die. The virile ships moved like silver daggers through space, cutting down humanity's last defenses with ease. Each explosion represented hundreds of lives lost in an instant. "Commander, the Asian defense grid just went dark," reported a young officer behind him. Her voice shook with barely controlled fear. Daehyun did not turn around. He had watched 3 billion people flee into underground shelters over the past week. Now those shelters were all that remained between humanity and total extinction. The virile dominion had appeared 8 months ago without warning. They had conquered 17 human colonies across the stars in that short time. Their technology was beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. Their weapons could slice through the strongest human shields like paper. Their ships moved faster than human missiles could track. Worst of all, they showed no interest in negotiation or mercy. Daehyun finally turned from the window and walked to the central command table. Admiral Soman stood there, her weathered face showing the exhaustion they all felt. Around the table sat the last leaders of free humanity. General Hyunwoo commanded what remained of the Special Forces. Dr. Minji represented the Science Division. A dozen other officers and politicians filled the remaining seats. "Report," Daehyun said simply. Soman's voice was steady despite the dire news she delivered. "We have 72 hours before Earth's planetary shields collapse. The virile are bombarding them constantly. Our fleet is down to 47 operational ships. They have over 300 in this system alone. What about evacuation?" asked one of the politicians, a man named Dongyun who still wore an expensive suit despite everything falling apart around them. "Evacuation to where?" Hyunwoo snapped. "Every colony is either destroyed or occupied. Earth is the last free human world. There is nowhere left to run." The room fell silent. Everyone knew the truth, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. Humanity had reached the end. The virile had deployed their silence weapon across the Sol system 3 days ago. It created a field that disrupted all long-range communications. Earth was isolated, cut off from any possible help. Dr. Minji stood up suddenly. "There might be another way," she said quietly. All eyes turned to her. She looked exhausted, her lab coat stained and wrinkled. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She had not slept since her family died on Mars colony 6 weeks ago. "I've been studying virile biology from the bodies we recovered," Minji continued. "There's something strange about their neural structure. It's crystalline, unlike anything in human biology. This makes them incredibly intelligent and gives them faster reflexes. But I think it also creates a weakness." "What kind of weakness?" Daehyun asked, leaning forward. "I need more samples to be certain," Minji said. "But preliminary tests suggest their crystalline neurons might be vulnerable to specific resonance frequencies. Basically, certain sound waves could potentially disrupt their brain function." Soman frowned. "Sound? We're being destroyed by plasma cannons and energy shields, and you want to fight them with sound?" "I know it sounds impossible," Minji admitted. "But the virile homeworld is nearly silent according to their transmissions. No atmosphere to carry sound, minimal seismic activity. They never evolved any defense against acoustic attacks because sound was never a threat in their environment." Hyunwoo spoke up. "I have a damaged virile cruiser's location. It crashed in the Pacific Ocean 2 days ago. We could send a team to retrieve biological samples in their computer systems, but it would be a one-way mission. The virile are hunting for survivors from that ship." "Do it," Daehyun ordered immediately. "Take your best people. Get those samples back here no matter what." "Wait," interrupted Dongyun. "We're authorizing a suicide mission based on a theory? We should be negotiating surrender terms." Daehyun's expression turned cold. "The virile don't take prisoners, counselor. They exterminate. We've seen what they do to captured colonies. Every man, woman, and child killed. We have nothing to negotiate with." "Then what do you propose?" Dongyun demanded. "We fight," Daehyun said simply. "Dr. Minji's theory is the only hope we have. If she's right, we might have found something the virile never expected. An advantage they can't counter because they don't even understand it exists." Admiral Soman studied the holographic display of Earth's orbit. The virile fleet formed a tight blockade around the planet. Their ships pulsed with energy as they continued their relentless bombardment of the shields. "Even if we develop this weapon, how do we use it? We can't get close enough to their ships." "We don't have to," said Minji, her voice gaining confidence. "If I'm right about the resonance effect, we could broadcast the frequency through space. or mount weapons on our remaining ships. The sound wouldn't travel in vacuum, but the resonance generators would create the same effect through electromagnetic pulses. You're talking about converting our entire military doctrine in 3 days. Someone said. Yes, Minji replied. I am. The room erupted in argument. Some officers thought it was insane. Others saw it as their only chance. Politicians demanded more studies and safety reviews. Hyunwoo's Special Forces commanders wanted to start immediately. Daehyun let them argue for exactly 5 minutes. Then he slammed his fist on the command table, and the room went quiet. Enough, he said. We don't have time for debate. Dr. Minji, you have full authority and resources for what I'm calling Project Fenrir. Admiral Soman, prepare our fleet for new weapon installations. General Hyunwoo, get those samples. The rest of you start evacuating all non-essential personnel to the deepest shelters. And if this doesn't work? Donghyun asked quietly. Daehyun looked at each person in the room. Then humanity dies fighting instead of cowering. I would rather face extinction on my feet than spend our last hours begging for mercy from an enemy that has none. Outside the bunker, another defense platform exploded. The shockwave rattled the reinforced walls. Everyone felt it in their bones. Time was running out faster than anyone wanted to admit. Hyunwoo saluted and left immediately to gather his team. Minji hurried to her laboratory, already making calculations in her head. Soman began issuing orders to the scattered fleet. In 72 hours, Earth's shields would fail. In 72 hours, humanity would either begin its comeback or breathe its last. Daehyun returned to the window and watched the burning sky. Somewhere up there, the Vrel commanders probably thought the war was already won. They had destroyed every human fleet sent against them. They had conquered every colony they attacked. Earth would be no different in their minds. But they had never faced a species that refused to accept defeat. They had never fought an enemy that became more dangerous when cornered. The Viral were about to learn a hard lesson. Humanity's greatest weapon was not technology or firepower. It was the stubborn refusal to surrender even when all hope seemed lost. The war was not over yet. 3 months after the medical station attack, the galaxy was in chaos. Entire worlds had gone dark, their populations too affected by fragmentation syndrome to maintain basic communications. Trade routes collapsed as augmented pilots lost their ability to navigate. Governments fell as leaders succumbed to the spreading disease of the mind. The great civilizations that had laughed at humanity's warnings were now on their knees, begging for help. Commander Somin stood on the bridge of the human rescue ship Mercy, watching a Vrelian colony approach on the view screen. The colony was built into an asteroid, home to 3 million beings. According to the last transmission received 2 weeks ago, 90% of the population was affected. All teams prepare for boarding, Soman ordered. Remember your training. These people are sick, not dangerous. Treat them with respect and compassion. Her crew moved with practiced efficiency. They had done this 17 times in the past month alone, boarding dying stations, evacuating populations, providing medical care to beings who had never shown humans any kindness. It was exhausting, heartbreaking work, but Soman wouldn't let her people quit. Not while there were lives to save. The Vrelian colony was worse than expected. Bodies floated in the corridors, those who had died before fragmentation completed. The living were in some ways harder to see. They stood or sat in strange positions, their eyes open but seeing nothing. Their augmented minds caught in endless loops of corrupted data. One of Soman's medics approached her, his face pale behind his helmet. Commander, we have maybe 1,000 survivors who can still be saved. But we'll need to work fast. Their augmentation systems are failing. Then we work fast, Soman replied. Get them on the ships. All of them. While rescue operations continued across the galaxy, Jiho's replacement, a doctor named Suman, worked in the main medical facility on Earth. She had taken over Jiho's research after his death, driven by a desire to honor his sacrifice. And today she had finally made a breakthrough. We can stop it, Suman announced to the medical council. We can halt the fragmentation syndrome. But the process is complicated, and there are consequences. Doyen attended the meeting via hologram, along with representatives from several alien governments. The Vrelian delegate who appeared was not the original speaker who had mocked humanity. That one was dead. This new representative was younger, humbler, and desperate. Please explain, Doyen said gently. Suman activated her presentation. The syndrome spreads through the artificial neural pathways created by advanced augmentation. To stop it, we must remove or severely limit those pathways. For most affected individuals, this means completely disabling their augmentation systems. What will that do to them? The Vrelian delegate asked, his voice shaking. They will survive, Sumin said carefully, but they will lose everything the augmentation gave them. Enhanced memories, learned skills, personality traits that developed after augmentation. In many cases, they will revert to who they were before they received the augments, which for some species means losing centuries of experiences. The chamber fell silent. Finally, a Kethran representative spoke. This is not a cure. This is a death sentence. You are asking us to become lesser versions of ourselves. We are offering you life, Doyen replied. Diminished, yes, but life. The alternative is complete fragmentation and death. There is no third option. The debate that followed was fierce. Some argued that forced treatment was unethical. Others insisted that allowing people to die when a cure existed was worse. Yunji, the chair of Earth's Ethics Committee, found herself at the center of the storm. She stood before a hearing, facing questions from both human and alien representatives. We cannot force this treatment on anyone, Yunji argued. Every sentient being has the right to choose their own fate. What we can do is offer the cure freely and honestly, explain what it will cost and what it will save, then let people decide. But many of the affected have already lost the capacity to make such decisions, someone pointed out. Their fragmented minds cannot understand the choice. Then their families must decide. Their loved ones who still have clarity of mind. And if there is no one, then we default to preservation of life. But we must always respect the dignity of choice where possible. While the debate continued, a young engineer named Nari worked in a laboratory beneath the surface of Mars. She had been studying the treatment protocols, looking for ways to improve them. And she had found something. The standard treatment is too aggressive, Nari explained to her supervisor. Yes, we need to disable the advanced augmentation systems, but we're also destroying pathways that could be preserved with more careful work. I've developed a modified protocol that targets only the corrupted systems. It takes longer, it's more expensive, and it's riskier, but it might save more of who these people are. Have you tested it? Only in simulations. But the results are promising. Patients could retain up to 60% more memories and skills compared to the standard treatment. How risky is riskier? Nari hesitated. There's a 15% chance of complete neural failure during the procedure. That means death. Her supervisor considered this carefully. Bring your research to the medical council. Let them decide. Back in space, Somin faced a crisis of a different kind. Her fleet had picked up a distress signal from a Vrelian colony ship. The message was garbled, but the meaning was clear. The entire crew had succumbed to fragmentation syndrome, and the ship was on a collision course with a populated station. Time to impact? Somin asked. 4 hours, 30 minutes, her navigator replied. The station has 200,000 inhabitants. They've already begun evacuation, but they won't get everyone out in time. Somin studied the tactical display. The colony ship was massive, moving at incredible speed. If it hit the station, the death toll would be catastrophic. But the ship also carried 3,000 Vrelians, all sick, all dying, but potentially savable if they could be reached in time. We board the ship, Somin decided. We take control of the navigation systems manually and redirect it. Her second officer objected. Commander, the entire crew is fragmented. The ship could be dangerous, and we only have 4 hours. We might not make it in time. We might not, Somin agreed. But we have to try. Prepare the boarding teams. The boarding action was nightmarish. Somin led her team through corridors filled with wandering Vrelians, their minds broken, their bodies still moving on instinct. Some were violent, lashing out at anything that moved. Others simply stood in place, trembling. The human team had to fight their way through, using non-lethal weapons and sedatives. They reached the navigation center with only 40 minutes to spare. The controls were designed for Vrelian hands, and the systems were all in an alien language. But humans had learned to adapt. They had learned to understand alien technology out of necessity. Overriding the autopilot, one of Somin's technicians said, his fingers flying over the controls. Coming about. New course plotted. The ship shuddered as its engines fired, pushing it into a new trajectory. Somin watched the tactical display, holding her breath. The colony ship passed within 200 meters of the station. close enough that people on both vessels could have seen each other through windows. But it passed without impact. The station was saved. 3,000 Vrelians were secured and would be transported to medical facilities, and Soman's team had done it with minutes to spare. When they returned to the Mercy, Soman found a message waiting for her. It was from the Vrelian government, one of the first official communications Earth had received from them since the crisis began. The message was simple. Thank you. We were wrong. You were right. Please help us. Soman shared the message with her crew. Many of them had lost friends in the medical station attack. They had every reason to be bitter, to want revenge. But instead she saw relief on their faces. Not because the Vrelians had admitted fault, but because it meant the healing could finally begin. Doyon received similar messages from across the galaxy. One by one, the proud civilizations that had mocked humanity were humbling themselves, asking for aid, acknowledging their mistakes. It brought him no joy. He had been right, yes, but the cost of that rightness was measured in millions of lives. In a private moment, Hyejin found him standing alone looking out at Earth through a viewport. We tried to warn them, Hyejin said softly. Not hard enough, Doyon replied. We should have found a way to make them listen. They didn't want to listen. Sometimes people need to learn through experience, not words. The experience is killing them. Hyejin stood beside him, sharing his view of their homeworld. Yes, but we're saving them too. And maybe, just maybe, we're all learning something important. About humility. About listening. About working together. Doyon nodded slowly. I hope so. Because if we don't learn from this, then all those deaths meant nothing. Below them, Earth turned peacefully in the darkness, and across the galaxy, human ships carried hope to dying worlds. 6 months passed since the Galactic Council rejected humanity's proposal. In that time, the galaxy continued as it always had. Ships moved between stars, trade flourished, and billions of beings lived their augmented lives without concern. But in the shadows, something was growing. Something terrible. Jiwon sat in her laboratory on Mars, staring at the data on her screens with growing horror. She was a psychologist who specialized in augmentation effects, and for the past 3 months she had been tracking reports from across the galaxy. What she found kept her awake at night. Computer. Display all reported cases of fragmentation syndrome by date and location, she said. The screens filled with points of light, each one representing a documented case. 6 months ago there had been only a handful, scattered across different worlds. Now there were thousands, and the numbers were growing exponentially. The pattern was clear. It started in areas with the highest concentration of advanced neural augmentation, then spread outward like ripples in water. Her assistant entered the lab carrying more reports. Dr. Jiwon, we just received new data from the Kethran homeworld. Their medical facilities are reporting a 300% increase in cases this month alone. Jiwon pulled up the Kethran data. The symptoms were identical to what humanity had experienced 50 years ago, but worse. Much worse. Affected individuals started with small memory gaps, brief moments of confusion. Then came personality changes. People who had been calm became violent. Others withdrew completely, losing all interest in the world around them. In the final stages, the victim's mind simply fragmented, breaking into pieces that could no longer function as a whole. What makes this different from our early cases? Her assistant asked. Scale and speed, Jiwon replied. When humans experimented with advanced augmentation, we were isolated cases, individual test subjects. But these alien civilizations have billions of people with augmented minds, all connected through shared neural networks. The syndrome isn't just affecting individuals anymore. It's spreading between them, jumping from mind to mind through their augmentation links. Across the galaxy on the human colony called New Sol, Taiyang faced a different kind of problem. He was a security officer, and his job had just become infinitely more complicated. A ship full of Vrelian refugees had just requested emergency docking permission. According to their distress call, half the crew was showing signs of fragmentation syndrome. Taiyang stood in the control room, watching the ship approach on his screens. His superior officer stood beside him looking worried. We can't let them dock, the superior said. If the syndrome spreads through neural networks and some of our colonists have basic augmentation, we could start an outbreak here. We also can't leave them to die, Taiyang replied. That ship has children on board. Families. Frelian children whose parents voted to laugh at our warnings 6 months ago. Taeyang turned to face his superior. Yes, and they were wrong. But that doesn't mean we should be wrong too. We're better than that. After a long moment, the superior nodded. All right. But we do this carefully. Quarantine protocols, full isolation, and anyone showing symptoms gets separated immediately. The Vrelian ship docked at the quarantine bay. Taeyang led the medical team that boarded it. What he found inside would haunt him for years. The ship was chaos. Some Vrelians lay unconscious in their beds, their augmented systems flickering with error messages. Others wandered the corridors, their eyes vacant, responding to voices only they could hear. A few were still functional, desperately trying to care for those who had fallen. One Vrelian female approached Taeyang. She was young, probably not much older than 20 in human years. Her augmentation ports sparked and smoked along her skull. Please help us, she begged. We didn't know. We didn't understand. The humans tried to warn us, but we wouldn't listen. Taeyang helped her to a medical transport. We'll do what we can. That's a promise. Back on Earth, the Galactic Council was finally forced to acknowledge the crisis. The virtual emergency session was chaotic, with delegates appearing as holograms from their quarantined worlds. The Vrelian leader who had mocked Doyen 6 months ago was noticeably absent. According to reports, he was in the final stages of fragmentation syndrome. Hyejin presented her findings to the council. She had been working non-stop, barely sleeping, trying to understand exactly what was happening and why. The mechanism is actually quite simple, she explained, displaying neural maps for the assembled delegates. Advanced neural augmentation creates artificial pathways in the brain. These pathways are more efficient than natural ones, so the brain begins to rely on them. Over time, the organic brain tissue atrophies. The person becomes dependent on the artificial systems. But these systems were never designed to fully replace organic consciousness. They lack the flexibility, the adaptability, the fundamental humanity of a natural mind. She changed the display to show a network diagram. Now add the fact that most augmented individuals are connected to each other through shared networks. When one mind begins to fragment, it sends corrupted signals to others. Those signals cause errors in their systems, which accelerate their own fragmentation. It becomes a cascade effect, spreading exponentially. A Kethrin delegate, one of the few still healthy enough to participate, interrupted. Is there a cure? Can this be stopped? We're working on it, Hyejin said. But the solution will require the removal or severe limitation of augmentation technology. Many affected individuals will need to have their systems completely disabled. That will cost them decades of memories, another delegate said. Skills they've spent lifetimes developing. Parts of their very personality that have been integrated with their augments. Yes, Hyejin agreed quietly, but the alternative is death. Or something worse than death. A fragmented existence with no consciousness, no awareness, just broken pieces of what used to be a person. The council chamber fell silent. Finally, a delegate from a species humanity had never worked with before spoke up. We formally request Earth's assistance in this matter. We acknowledge that your warnings were correct. We should have listened. We are prepared to accept any reasonable terms for your help. Before Doyen could respond, another delegate objected. This is a trick. The humans created this syndrome. They released it as a weapon to make us dependent on them. This is all part of their plan to take control of the galaxy. That's insane, Doyen said sharply. We tried to prevent this. We warned you. We shared our research freely. If we wanted to harm you, we would have stayed silent and let the crisis develop. But the conspiracy theory had been planted. In the days that followed, it spread almost as fast as the syndrome itself. Desperate populations looking for someone to blame latched onto the idea. Anti-human sentiment grew on several worlds. There were protests, riots, and finally violence. The attack came without warning. A group of extremist Kethrins, convinced that humanity had caused the crisis, attacked a human medical station that was treating fragmentation syndrome patients. The station was in neutral space, marked with clear medical insignia, but the extremists didn't care. They wanted revenge. Jiho was on duty when the attack happened. He was a medical officer, dedicated to saving lives regardless of species. He died doing exactly that, shielding a Kethrin patient from weapons fire. 12 other humans died with him, along with several alien patients who were too sick to evacuate. When news of the attack reached Earth, there were calls for retaliation. Some wanted to withdraw all aid. Others demanded military action against the Kethran extremists. But Doyon made a different choice. "We continue," he announced in a broadcast to all human colonies. "We continue to help because it's the right thing to do. We continue because those people, even the ones who attack us, are victims of fear and desperation. We continue because that's what makes us human. Not our caution about technology, not our supposed wisdom, but our compassion, our ability to help even those who hurt us." The broadcast reached alien worlds too. Many who heard it felt shame. The conspiracy theories began to lose their power. And slowly, grudgingly, the galaxy began to accept what humanity had been trying to tell them all along. But the crisis was far from over. In fact, in many ways, it was just beginning. The great chamber of Zenith Prime floated in the darkness of space, a massive ring of metal and glass that housed the most powerful beings in the known galaxy. Inside, representatives from 47 different star systems sat in their designated areas, their forms as varied as the stars themselves. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few existed as pure energy contained in specialized suits. But today, all eyes turned toward the small delegation from Earth. Doyon stood at the central podium, his dark suit simple compared to the elaborate garments and armor worn by the other delegates. His hands gripped the edges of the speaking platform as he looked out at the assembled crowd. Behind him, Hyejin prepared her presentation, her fingers moving quickly across a data pad. Mira stood to the side, watching the reactions of the various council members with careful attention. The human ambassador took a deep breath and began to speak. His voice carried through the chamber's translation system, converting his words into thousands of languages simultaneously. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," Doyon said, "humanity comes before you today with a proposal born from experience and concern. We ask that this council consider a universal ban on neural augmentation technology beyond established ethical limits." A ripple of movement passed through the chamber. Some delegates leaned forward with interest, but most shifted in what could only be described as amusement. The Vrelian representative, a massive insectoid creature with 6 arms and compound eyes that glittered like jewels, made a chittering sound that the translator rendered as laughter. Doyon continued, ignoring the reaction. "Our research shows that unrestricted neural augmentation leads to serious consequences. The human brain, and we believe the minds of other species as well, can only handle so much artificial integration before problems begin. We have documented cases of personality fragmentation, memory loss, and complete psychological breakdown." Hyejin stepped forward and activated her presentation. Holographic images filled the air above the podium, showing brain scans and medical records from human test subjects. The images were disturbing, showing neural pathways twisted and corrupted, natural brain functions suppressed by artificial systems. "These are the results of our early experiments with advanced neural augmentation," Hyejin explained. 50 years ago, humanity was eager to enhance our minds with technology. We wanted to think faster, remember more, process information like computers, but we discovered something terrible. The more we augmented, the less human we became. People lost their sense of self. They forgot who they were. Some became violent. Others simply stopped functioning. The Vrelian representative stood, his mechanical voice booming through the chamber. "The humans speak of their failures as if they were universal truths. We Vrelians have used neural augmentation for 10,000 years. Our entire civilization is built upon the foundation of enhanced minds. We have no such problems. Perhaps humanity is simply too primitive to handle such technology properly." Laughter erupted from multiple sections of the chamber. The Kethran delegates, reptilian beings covered in golden scales and expensive jewelry, hissed their agreement. Their speaker rose, his forked tongue tasting the air as he spoke. "The humans fear what they cannot master," the Kethran said. "Neural augmentation is the most profitable technology in the galaxy. Billions of beings across hundreds of worlds depend on these enhancements for their daily lives. And now Earth, a world that has been part of this council for less than 2 centuries, wants to ban it? This is absurd. This is an insult to every advanced civilization here." Doyon felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice calm. "We are not saying that all neural augmentation is dangerous. Basic enhancements, medical applications, these are acceptable. But there must be limits. There must be safeguards. What we propose is simple regulation, not a complete ban. Regulation based on human weakness, another delegate called out. This one was a floating orb of light, a being from a dimension humanity barely understood. We have evolved beyond such concerns. Our minds are not fragile like yours. Mira watched as more and more delegates joined the mockery. She made notes on her pad, recording who spoke and what they said, but she also noticed something else. Some of the delegates, even as they laughed, showed signs of stress, small tics in their movements, brief moments of confusion in their expressions. She marked these observations carefully. Hijin tried again, bringing up more data. Please look at these patterns. The neural degradation doesn't happen immediately. It takes years, sometimes decades, but it always happens when augmentation exceeds certain thresholds. The artificial systems begin to dominate the organic brain. Identity becomes fragmented across multiple processing centers. The individual consciousness breaks down. Enough, the Vrelian leader declared. We have heard your warnings. We have seen your primitive data. The Galactic Council does not make decisions based on fear and outdated morality. We make decisions based on progress and advancement. That is what separates the great civilizations from the lesser ones. The vote was called. One by one, the delegates cast their decisions. The results displayed on the main screen for all to see. 43 votes against the proposal. 3 abstentions from species that had limited contact with neural technology, and 1 vote in favor from Earth alone. Doyen stood silent for a moment, looking at the results. Then he spoke again, his voice carrying a weight that made some delegates pause in their celebrations. This council has made its choice, he said, but understand this. We came here not to show our superiority, but to share our mistakes. We came to warn you because we care about all sentient life, not just our own. History will remember this day, and I promise you, you will regret not listening to us. Is that a threat, human? The Vrelian asked, his mechanical voice sharp. No, Doyen replied. It is a prediction. One I desperately hope proves wrong. The human delegation left the chamber in silence. Other delegates watched them go, some still laughing, others looking thoughtful. As they walked through the corridors of Zenith Prime toward their ship, Mira spoke quietly to Doyen. Ambassador, I noticed something during the session. Several of the delegates showed signs of neural stress. Small seizures, memory lapses, behavioral anomalies. I documented everything. Doyen stopped walking and looked at his aide. How many? At least 12 that I could confirm. Maybe more. Hyejin overheard and joined them. It might already be starting. If the syndrome spreads through their neural networks, through their shared augmentation systems, then we could be looking at the beginning of something terrible. Doyen resumed walking, his expression grim. Then we prepare. If they won't listen to warnings, maybe they'll listen to proof. Let's hope we're ready when that day comes. Behind them in the Great Chamber, the Galactic Council moved on to other business. The human proposal was already forgotten by most, dismissed as the foolish concerns of a young and inexperienced species. But in the weeks and months to come, they would remember. They would all remember. 1 year had passed since the treatment programs began. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Worlds that once gleamed with technological excess now showed a quieter beauty. Cities still functioned, but differently. The constant hum of networked consciousness had been replaced by something more fundamental. Individual voices. Separate minds. The diversity of true thought. The Galactic Council chambers had been rebuilt on Zenith Prime. The station had suffered damage during the crisis when automated systems failed. Now it stood restored, its architecture simpler but somehow more honest. Representatives from 47 star systems gathered once more. But this time, the atmosphere was completely different. Doyen stood at the same podium where he had delivered his warning 18 months earlier. But he was not alone. Beside him stood representatives from species that had suffered most during the crisis. The Vrelian speaker was a young female named Verena, one of the few who had retained enough memory to serve in government. The Kethrin representative was an older male who had lost 300 years of memories but gained something he claimed was more valuable: perspective. We gathered today not to celebrate, Doyen began, but to remember, to learn, and to ensure that what happened never happens again. The chamber was silent. No one laughed. No one mocked. They listened. Verena spoke next, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. The Vrelian people lost 40% of our population to fragmentation syndrome. Those who survived are diminished. We have forgotten achievements that took millennia to accomplish. We have lost art, science, philosophy, entire lifetimes of experience. This is our fault. We were warned. We chose not to listen. Now we choose differently. The Catherine representative continued. The Catherine Collective has restructured our entire society. No longer will profit drive our decisions about technology and safety. No longer will we put advancement before wisdom. We have learned the hardest lesson our species has ever faced, and we will never forget it. One by one, species that had scoffed at humanity's proposal stood to acknowledge their mistake. Some did so with grace. Others struggled, their pride still wounded. But all of them understood that something fundamental had shifted in the galaxy. When the speeches concluded, a vote was called. The proposal was simple. Establish the Galactic Technology Ethics Council with humanity as its founding chair. The council would review all new technologies for potential risks. It would set standards for augmentation. It would ensure that profit and progress never again came before safety and wisdom. The vote was unanimous. Hyojin accepted the position as the first chair of the new Ethics Council. She had earned it through her tireless work during the crisis, her research that had saved millions, her refusal to give up even when hope seemed lost. Our first priority, Hyojin announced, is to establish comprehensive guidelines for neural augmentation technology. Basic medical applications will remain available. Enhancements that improve quality of life without risking identity will be permitted. But the era of unlimited augmentation is over. The era of careful consideration begins now. In the weeks following the council session, other changes rippled through the galaxy. Taeyang, the security officer who had opened New Seoul's doors to Vrelian refugees, received commendations from 7 different governments. His protocols for managing augmentation-related crises became standard across all human colonies and were adopted by dozens of alien worlds. Soman returned to Earth as a hero, though she rejected the label. I just did my job, she told reporters. Every member of my crew did their job. We saved people because that's what needed doing, not because we wanted recognition. But recognition came anyway. The Vrelian government erected a memorial on their homeworld, listing the names of all who had died in the crisis. Prominently featured was a section honoring the human medical workers killed in the extremist attack, with Jiho's name at the top. Beneath the names was an inscription, "They died saving those who attacked them. May we live worthy of their sacrifice." Yoonji's ethical framework, refined through thousands of impossible decisions, was published as the foundation for the new Galactic Medical Ethics Standards. Universities across dozens of worlds began teaching her principles. She retired from active duty, exhausted and haunted by the choices she had made, but knowing that her work would prevent future suffering. Nari's modified treatment protocol was refined and made available to all who needed it. The success rate improved to 92% with only a 3% mortality risk. Thousands who would have lost most of their memories were able to retain significant portions of their identity. Nari herself became director of a new research institute dedicated to safe augmentation technology. But perhaps the most significant change happened in places less visible. In classrooms where children of multiple species learned together, studying not just science and math but ethics and consequences. In laboratories where researchers now asked not just, "Can we do this?" but "Should we do this?" In homes where families gathered without the constant distraction of networked consciousness, rediscovering the simple pleasure of being present with each other. On Mars, Juwon completed her final report on the fragmentation syndrome. Her research documented everything: the causes, the spread, the treatment, and most importantly, the lessons learned. The report concluded with a section she had spent months writing and rewriting. Humanity was not special, she wrote. We were not smarter or more advanced than the species who suffered from fragmentation syndrome. We were simply more cautious, and we were cautious because we had already made the same mistakes on a smaller scale. We learned from our failures. The tragedy is that others had to learn from theirs at such terrible cost. But perhaps there is value in shared pain. Perhaps the galaxy needed to learn this lesson together, so we could move forward together, united by common experience and common purpose. The report was distributed to every educational institution in the galaxy. It became required reading for anyone studying technology, medicine, or ethics. Mira, who had observed behavioral anomalies in council members during that first fateful session, became humanity's youngest ambassador. Her attention to detail and ability to see what others missed made her invaluable in the new diplomatic landscape. She worked alongside Doyen, learning from his experience while bringing fresh perspectives. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if they had listened to us the first time?" Mira asked him one day. Doyen considered the question carefully. "Every day, but I think I know the answer. If they had listened, they would have done so grudgingly, resentfully. They would have followed our guidelines but not understood them. The regulations would have been weak, easily circumvented. And eventually, the crisis would have happened anyway, just slower, more spread out, harder to recognize and treat. So you think this was better? No, this was horrible. Millions died. Billions were diminished. But now everyone understands why the rules exist. They're not following humanity's requirements. They're following their own hard-won wisdom. That makes the foundation stronger." 2 years after the crisis began, the first graduating class completed their studies at the newly founded Institute for Ethical Advancement. The students were human and alien, young beings who had witnessed the fragmentation crisis and committed themselves to preventing future disasters. Among them was a young Vrelian who had been just a child when the crisis began. Her family had died, and she had been treated with the standard protocol, losing memories of parents she would never recall. But she had been adopted by a human family on New Sol, the same colony where Taiyang had accepted refugees. She grew up between two worlds, two cultures, learning from both. "I don't remember my biological parents," she said in her graduation speech. "The treatment took those memories before they could fully form. But I remember the humans who took me in. I remember Taiyang, who opened the doors when others wanted them closed. I remember the medical teams who worked themselves to exhaustion to save people like me. I remember that humanity tried to warn us, and when we didn't listen, they helped us anyway. That's the example I want to follow. Not just learning from mistakes, but caring enough to help others avoid them." The speech was broadcast across the galaxy. Many who heard it wept. On a quiet evening on Earth, Doyen received a personal message from Kelix, the Vrelian who had been Nari's first experimental patient. They had remained in contact, two people connected by circumstance and mutual respect. "I wanted you to know," Kelix wrote, "that the Vrelian Council is officially adopting your original proposal. All of it. Every restriction, every guideline, every safety measure you suggested. We're going further than you asked, actually. We're implementing waiting periods, mandatory education, comprehensive psychological evaluation before any augmentation. We're making it difficult because it should be difficult. Such a significant choice should never be made lightly." Doyen shared the message with Hyejin. They sat together, looking out at Earth, thinking about the long journey from that first rejected proposal to this moment. "We paid such a terrible price for this wisdom," Hyejin said softly.